I hope that, as on the pre-market side, where we want to have the right people to foster innovation and make sure that the right devices get to market in a timely way and the wrong devices don't. On the post-market side, I hope FDA is going to be able to continue to have the right people to look at that data and make those right decisions.
Hello, and welcome to FDA Watch. I'm Wayne Pines. I've been involved with FDA in one way or another for several decades. I was an associate commissioner of the agency, and I've authored or edited 16 books about FDA.
And I'm Shelly Garg, and I'm the managing partner and founder of Garg Law, a full-service FDA-focused law firm. I have been on the private side advising companies on regulatory compliance and enforcement for the last 15 years.
And by now, all our subscribers know what to expect from FDA Watch. We've been broadcasting all of this year. We're an independent, nonpartisan, national forum for discussing the latest developments and trends and issues surrounding FDA.
And if you haven't subscribed yet, do so today at fdawatch.net. You'll be the first to receive an email when a new episode drops, including bonus episodes when there's breaking news. Plus, you'll get quick access to our headlines and resource links, as well as some background about our guests.
In this episode, we're going to focus on medical devices. We have two outstanding guests to help us discuss these topics. You'll meet them in just a moment.
First, let's get to some headlines.
Right. We have a whole bunch of headlines, more than usual. RFK Jr. and the new FDA Commissioner, Marty Makary, held a press conference to announce their new initiative on food dye safety. The initiative is consistent with the statements made by Kennedy before and during his confirmation hearing. We'll be dealing with this program in greater depth in a future podcast. Very important development, a priority for both RFK and for Makary.
And secondly, if you haven't heard Dr. Makary's interview with Megyn Kelly on the Megyn Kelly Show, you should. It dealt with Makary's views on FDA's role in combating chronic illness, on the standard for orphan drug approvals, on his thoughts on how to use data to better monitor drug effects, and a host of other issues. The interview is available on YouTube.
And I would encourage everybody to listen, as Shelly just said. It really was enlightening with regard to Dr. Makary's views on a large range of topics. From the Pharma desk, drug development is decelerating amid FDA staffing cuts. According to a story in the Wall Street Journal, drug developers and biotech companies are being forced to push back clinical trials and drug testing following mass layoffs at the FDA. There have been delays in FDA's core functions, such as approving amendments to clinical trials and shepherding companies through drug approvals, and that's hindering the industry's ability to develop new drugs. This is according to industry officials. That's what they're seeing at the agency as a result of the cutbacks. Drugs are now taking longer to get through clinical trials, and therefore to patients who need them. There's a snowball effect. There's a continued lack of funding for testing new possible treatments, and that's based on the Wall Street Journal story. From the device desk, a federal court, as we all know, shot down FDA's rule that reclassifies lab services as medical devices. This case has been very well publicized. The point we want to make is that the case represents a challenge to federal regulatory overreach following the Loper-Bright decision, which gave judges more authority to overrule federal agency judgments. In this case, the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Texas vacated FDA's 2024 final rule that sought to bring lab-developed test services under the scope of the agency's medical device regulatory framework. The case marks a signature moment for clinical labs and for diagnostic companies post-Chevron. The Chevron decision was an earlier decision that basically the Loper-Bright decision overturned, and it highlights the judiciary's increasing willingness to limit FDA authority following Loper-Bright. Very important development in a larger scope, and we'll be following that.
From the foods desk, FDA reportedly did not disclose information surrounding fatal E. coli outbreak linked to lettuce last year. According to an internal FDA report uncovered by NBC News, the outbreak sickened 89 people across 15 states in November, hospitalized 36 people, and killed one person. The agency made its first public mention of the outbreak in its Coordinated Outbreak and Response Evaluation, or CORE, investigations table after the investigation was closed, but it did not disclose those details about the outbreak or reveal the implicated firms. Per the internal FDA report, this was because there was no relevant product remaining in commerce by the time the agency opened its investigation. From the cosmetics desk, PCPC released a statement following FDA's announcement that it will phase out animal testing requirements for monoclonal antibodies and other drugs. Although the agency's announcement focused on pharmaceutical testing, PCPC is pushing for an extension to cosmetics and personal care products. A prepared statement released in mid-April says, "We agree with the FDA that continued reliance on outdated animal testing models is unnecessary and inefficient, and we urge FDA to extend this ban to cosmetics and over-the-counter drugs, such as sunscreen products as well." The statement concludes, "We are encouraged to see positive momentum in this direction and look forward to continued engagement with the FDA to advance efficient, innovative, and safe methodologies. It remains to be seen whether FDA will expand the phase out to cosmetics and personal care products, but we'll certainly keep an eye on this very important issue." Now, Wayne, let's meet our guests.
Joining us today is Dan Schultz. Dan is Principal of Medical Devices and Combination Products at Eliquent. He joined that company following a long career as a physician, as a teacher, member of the U.S. Public Health Service, the regulatory expert, and of course, from 2004 to 2009, he served as Director of the Center for Devices and Radiological Health. Welcome to FDA Watch, Dan.
Thanks very much. Nice to be here.
Also joining us today is Jonathan Kahan. John is now a global regulatory partner at Hogan Lovells. He is the former director of the firm's medical device and technology practice group and an adjunct professor at the George Washington University Law School, teaching medical device law. He presently serves as the general counsel of the Association of Medical Diagnostics Manufacturers. Welcome to FDA Watch, John.
Thank you as well.
Let me ask the first question. We've all been watching staff reductions at CDRH around FDA. How will these staff reductions affect FDA's ability to do its job in the device area, in both the short term and the long term? And the second part of the question, what do you think will be the long-term effect on public health, particularly as it relates to devices? Dan, let me start with you and then turn to John.
Sure. I think there's a lot to be worried about, just in terms of the numbers and in terms of the kinds of people that they're reducing. Basically, looking at probationary people who tend to be the younger, more recently graduated experts, and especially in devices, which is such a rapidly evolving area. You need to have people who are, up to date on the latest types of technologies, software, AI, robotics. And those are the people that CDRH really needs to hire and needs to mentor and bring along as the next sort of generation of device regulators. So, basically letting those kind of people go, as well as some of the more experienced and high-level managers who bring, the historical knowledge and precedent and all the other things that are important. So I think, just from that standpoint alone, this is a very dangerous time. And then I guess the other side of that is, all of the statements, that you've talked about in the past, just how FDA, how CDRH officials are characterized is just demoralizing, I think, for the people that are still there, and how much that affects their ability to do their jobs. I have the utmost confidence in the staff to do the best that they can under these circumstances. But certainly in the short term, it's difficult, and maybe we can talk about the long term after John kind of weighs in.
Right, John. Let me ask you the same question. Just ask Dan.
Sure. So I think it's been a roller coaster, as are many of the initiatives that have been ongoing at HHS and the Trump administration generally. The questions that we get asked by our clients the most is this, of course, is this going to delay our market authorization? Are we going to be able to start our clinical study? And we have a meeting of all of our partners and staff every week on Mondays, and this is a major topic of discussion. And since we represent 1,200 device companies before FDA, we get a pretty good view as to what's happening in the different divisions at OPEC and CDRH. So with regard to OPEC, as you know, they fired 200 people. They hired back many people that had been let go. The director of OPEC said he wasn't coming back and basically said, I've had it with you guys. With regard to the base reviewers, we have meetings, multiple meetings with FDA every week, some in person, some by Zoom, and we are missing lead reviewers in some of those meetings. We don't know everybody, whether they're just on vacation or whether they're not, whether they've been reduced in force or whether they've been let go permanently. We do know that we've been told some of our reviewers and some of the supervisors are not coming back. So we are seeing delays in pre-submissions. We're seeing delays in AINN letters. We're seeing delays in de novo reviews, PMA reviews, 510K reviews. So I would say right now it's too early to tell in the long term, but in the short term, we're seeing delays and some confusion on the part of the different reviewers and supervisors within CDRH. FDA has told many of the key reviewers and very highly trained PhDs and medical officers that they would not be permanently reduced in force, that those, I guess we call them the prized employees, will be given special consideration. And so many of those people who were working remotely have been told that they are exempt from FDA's return to office requirements as well. So those people who we had, MDs, medical officers who were, 1,000 miles or 2,000 miles away from White Oak, who are still working. So those people have been exempted. But we do see it's going to be very difficult, as Dan said, to recruit people in this kind of chaotic situation, especially the highly trained people who we need to work with, who understand our clients' technologies, especially the AI experts there, many of whom have been let go. We don't see this as a very good sign as to what the long-term results could be. We can talk about that in a minute.
Thanks, John. This is sort of touching on this theme here, but and I know there's no crystal ball to sort of guide this next question, but can you both comment, Dan, you first, on what major regulatory shifts or guidances that stakeholders should be watching for in 2025 and beyond? Obviously there's a lot of things in flux, but what do you think the future holds for medical device regulation, and what might it look like in 5 to 10 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of two ways to answer that question. One is, I think, in general, where the regulatory process for at CDRH goes is based on the changes in technology, like I said before. So, when I started at CDRH, oh God, I don't even want to say it, 30 years ago, I was in the surgical devices group, and we were looking at scalpels and handheld instruments and endoscopes and things like that. Well, now everything is a smart device, everything is robotic or minimally invasive based on advanced technology, and I think that's going to continue. Industry is not going to stop. Inventors are not going to stop. Creating new types of medical technology. Which I think has really transformed a lot of areas in medicine over the last number of decades. So I think that, to answer your question about where the regulations are going to go. I think they're going to go in the direction, or they need to go in the direction of figuring out ways to regulate these new types of technologies. In terms of the staff and the process and the people, that's where I have some major concerns, as we've talked about. Is, are we going to be able to? Is FDA going to be able to attract the right type of expertise in order to keep up with the changing technology? And I think, I think even if things change, next administration, whatever, I'm afraid that this type of environment that's been created is going to have a long term effect on some of the best and brightest that FDA needs and wants to attract in order to do their job. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but I think there's a lot of different parts to it.
Thanks, Dan. John, any thoughts?
Sure. So, based on what we see coming at us from our clients, it's clear AI and digitization, digital health is going to be significantly increasing. It's now on a very high. It's going to be a high profile right now. It's going to become even more high profile. Issues relating to the cybersecurity of different devices has been just increasing. We get questions a lot in all of our submissions with regard to cybersecurity issues. We believe software as a medical device is an issue, and what actually constitutes a medical device over the next 10 years. As you've seen, if you go to an Apple Watch or a Fitbit or some of those devices, there are questions as to whether some of the features of those devices actually are regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. And if they are they going to be regulated through FDA's enforcement discretion? Or are some of those going to come under FDA's wellness guidance document, where they're going to be regulated if they meet certain criteria? So we see more of that coming down the road. The area where I think you're going to see the most change is actually going to be in combinations of drugs, devices, human tissue, biological products. We do a huge amount of work in the combination products area. And whether those products are going to be primarily regulated by the device center, the drug center, the biologic center, all of those issues are up for consideration. And anybody who works with the Office of Combination Products knows it can be a very difficult path once you get into the OCP decision-making process.
When you have a client who is having problems because of the staff at FDA not being there because of a slowdown, what do you advise them to do? Let me start with John and then Dan.
So it's a very good question. I would say our rule is that you try to work out issues with the Office of Product Evaluation and Quality and each of the OHT offices at the lowest level possible. We try to work them out with the lead reviewer, the assistant director. Sometimes we have to go to the office director. We try not to go out of the office and try to work it out there. If we can't work it out there, we typically then try to bring in the ombudsman, Avi Desta or Ken Skodasek, and we ask them, look, we're having these problems. What would you recommend the next step would be? They have authority over, it's not really appeals, but the next line of supervisor. We often do go to both of them. They're extremely helpful as to what the next step is. Rarely, if ever, do we go to the CDRH director, but we do sometimes, and sometimes we go outside of CDRH up to the commissioner's office or to HHS. That's very rare. I think the cardinal rule is the higher up you go within FDA trying to work out a problem, the greater the chances you're going to lose. So we try to keep it at a lower level.
Dan, same question for you. You were CDRH director for a number of years. What would you advise clients in this environment, which is sort of unique, to do?
Yeah, I think I certainly agree that there's a process, and but those are issues that that have been around forever, right? I mean, there's Jonathan and I have had a few conversations over the years when I was there, where there was a disagreement on what reasonable assurance meant, and sometimes the FDA reviewers think reasonable is up here, and the company thinks it's down there, and you do your best to try to try to iron it out. And as an office director and center director, I was privileged to be in a number of those different conversations. I think what's different now is that what we talked about before. Do they have enough people and the right people to try to work, at least understand what the issues are in order to have a reasonable conversation and be able to do their job. And I think one of the things that I would say to industry, do your best to really make your submissions as clear as possible. Give FDA everything, support them in as much as you can in explaining what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it. If necessary, get some other outside people to come in and look at your submissions and get a second set of eyes. I think one of the areas that is suffering and will continue to suffer is with the pre-submission program, just because it's very, very time consuming. The number of pre-submissions have gone up dramatically over the last few years, and I don't think that the agency is going to have enough people to support them. So I think a lot of that is going to shift back to the company to make good decisions and provide good information, so that they don't have to have all that back and forth. When there are differences of opinion, yes, obviously use those mechanisms. But I think the first order of business is to try to avoid any of that and try to get to a good understanding with the review group, as John pointed out.
Last question before the break. How is FDA responding to the supply chain disruptions that we've been seeing? Part of that is due to COVID. Now we have the challenge, which is yet to be completely defined in terms of tariffs. And what systems are in place at FDA to track and respond to supply chain problems? Dan, let me start with you here again.
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person to ask that question. I haven't really been involved. I know that over the last few years there have been efforts within the center to try to address shortages and make accommodations. And occasionally, that happened back in the day when I was there as well. There were questions about heparin supply. I don't know if you remember way back when. And there's sort of decision making in terms of do you get rid of all the heparin, and then there's no syringes, and then there's no this, then there's no that, and you have to sometimes common sense needs to kind of drive some of those decisions. You may not be able to do everything that you want to do and regulate everything to the nth degree, and then find out that you've done more harm than good. So I'm sure those same kinds of conversations are going on. I know, and some of my clients, are having major issues related to the tariffs, and having a lot of either their finished products or their components, not being available, and really having to sort of change their entire approach to the pipeline, and what they're going to be able to bring to the U.S.
John?
So this issue we dealt with extensively at the beginning of COVID. And so did Congress, and so did the entire device industry. So what Congress decided to do back in March of 2020, Congress passed a new section of the Food and Drug Act I think it was 506J, which dealt with what do you do with medical device shortages, because there were a lot of medical device shortages then about to come up during COVID, and it got very serious and impacted on patient health. And so what FDA then did is they said, we're going to publish a list of those products where there are shortages. And that usually broke up into two different areas. One, just there were problems. A product was being recalled and an entire area of medical device technology was not going to be available. And so what Congress did and what FDA did is they said, notify us. Let us know if there's going to be a permanent discontinuation, for example, because of a recall, or there's going to be an interruption. And so there actually is a website on FDA which lists those products which are subject to shortage. And FDA also said, we want to talk about, we want to talk about mitigations. What are we all going to do when these very important, sometimes life supporting devices are not available? And so the key first, and the FDA issued a guidance document, I think it was 2023, very much at the end of COVID, and they updated it a few months ago, which basically says, notify us, we'll work with you as to what's occurred, and we'll work with you as to what the mitigation is. If you remember, I think the administration actually invoked the defense authorities to order production of certain devices that were in shortage during COVID. But basically that it's a notification process now, and then the companies that we represent and others then work with FDA as to what the appropriate mitigation is because of the shortage.
Thanks, John. We're going to take a quick break right now, but don't go anywhere because we'll be right back.
And we're back. We're talking about the device landscape around FDA in these challenging times.
John, we'll start with you following the break. Can you comment on how effective the current post-market surveillance system is in detecting device-related adverse events?
Well, I think there's a lot of layers of this. And obviously, FDA's first line of defense, where there are issues in the marketplace relating to devices, is medical device reporting under Part 803 of the CFR. And you are required, of course, to notify FDA through the MDR process if there are events which have a significant potential serious effect, or you have actual problems with a device malfunctioning, which could have an effect on the life and safety of the patients. And so that's the first line of defense. And the FDA, of course, also looks at websites. They get reports all the time from people, and so they have many areas where they get information back. Once they decide that there is a significant issue with regard that's raised by post-market surveillance, they can issue a 522 order, which they did it, for example, I'm trying to think of one, a transvaginal mesh, where they told all the companies marketing those products which were approved, because of what we've seen in the marketplace, you have to start new post-market studies, and they issued what we call a 522 order. They can deal with that. That's a post-market surveillance study that they can order. They also have unique device identification requirements now, which were not in effect previously. And UDIs on each of the devices allows them to connect what's happening with the patient directly to the device. So UDIs have been a fairly successful way of dealing with trying to figure out what's actually happening in the marketplace. There are also registries around the world We deal with the orthopedics group a lot because they rely heavily on registries around the world, which are very well organized to figure out what's actually happening in the marketplace. And also there are real world evidence studies which FDA looks at as well. And there are also, for certain kinds of devices, there are tracking requirements. So I would say, FDA's post-market surveillance requirements have been heavily criticized since Dan and I started doing this. It's always been a problem to get your finger on something that's a problem out there. Sometimes it gets beyond that and patients are injured. If you read, some of the GAO reports, there have been hundreds of thousands of injuries. And I think in the last GAO report, it was like 85,000 deaths related to medical devices between 2008 and 2018. So there are bad things happening, but FDA's early warning system through MDRs, through other kinds of post-market surveillance activity, I think it works very well, even though it's not flawless by any means.
Thanks, John. Dan, any comments?
Yeah, no, I agree that there are lots of tools, and I think FDA does the best that they can. I just would make one comment sort of on the MDR and the MAUDE database, which is somewhat misunderstood. I think one of the problems with that database is that it lacks denominator data, and that makes basically you're constantly trying to find the sort of the needle in the haystack, and you're looking to try to put your finger on how many adverse events does it take to get to those other remedies
Yeah.
that John was talking about, and that's a challenge. There's no two ways about it. Again, I think one of the things that we haven't heard yet is it takes people to look at those databases. The databases don't answer the questions themselves. The databases provide signals, information, etc. But it takes people who are experienced in looking at these post-market issues to try to make sense and try to figure out which are the ones that are really a threat, which are the ones that require immediate attention or later attention. And I hope that as on the pre-market side, where we want to have the right people to foster innovation and make sure that the right devices get to market in a timely way and the wrong devices don't. On the post-market side, I hope FDA is going to be able to continue to have the right people to look at that data and make those right decisions.
Could I just add one gloss to that?
Sure.
And that is the first line of defense really is not the Food and Drug Administration. The first line of defense is the company's own quality procedures. The company keeps track of complaints. They keep track of injuries that are reported to them. They trend their data. That's all required under Part 820 of the regulations. And so when a company sees a complaint trend that's going up, especially if there's a death, what the companies do is they do health hazard evaluations. They look at corrective and preventive actions that need to be taken. And hopefully the company will identify issues before FDA even gets there. Sometimes FDA identifies those issues during inspections, but the companies are actually fairly good at setting up their own early warning systems on this because they don't want to be sued. They don't want products liability lawyers all over them. And therefore, that kind of trending and complaint handling is pretty critical to this post-market surveillance issue.
Thanks, John. Companies will likely cut back on investments during this sort of unpredictable, uncertain environment. Um, what do you think we can anticipate about declining research investments, and what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so the lifeblood of any company is its research and development. And especially in certain areas, in the cardiovascular devices area, orthopedics area. They're across the board, surgical devices, in vitro diagnostics, radiation devices. There are just amazing innovations being made. We work a lot on proton beam therapy devices, and what's happening there, and the treatment methodologies, carbon ion technologies. All of those issues are undergoing research, new development, and so I think companies have, especially the larger, the Fortune 500 companies, have set aside a certain amount of money they believe that will help them move to the next generation of products that will lead to very profitable devices in the future. So those companies are going to continue to devote a certain amount of money to research and development. It all depends upon whether the marketplace implodes or not. If the marketplace implodes because of tariffs or other marketing restrictions from this administration, then it may well be that research and development is going to be cut back. I think the more important question is, will the research and development funds, the investments from the private equity companies and the companies that invest in small startups, whether those monies are going to go away? Because we're a large part of the pipeline of new technologies comes from those startups. And if those startups are starved of money, new technologies, new research is going to suffer. So I think it's at two levels, depending upon whether you're a startup, a mid-level, or one of the Fortune 500. I think that a lot of the issues are going to be examined as to where's the right place to put the money.
I agree 100%. I mean, I think the one thing that, that industry wants from, they want is certainty, and they want, out of FDA, they want consistency. They want to be able to know that, it's not a matter of, is the bar too high or is the bar too low? Yes, we can argue that and, make some adjustments, but understanding where the bar is and what the requirements are so that they can, plan ahead and get the investments that they need in order to meet that bar. I think that's a critical factor. And again, going back to, FDA being able to put out appropriate guidances and meet with companies and have these interactions so that and I agree, it's really the small companies. I mean, that's where most of these things actually start, and then eventually they get sort of swallowed up. So yeah, the big companies can survive. They've got products on the market, and they can put away a certain amount for research and development, and probably will carry on over at least for a certain period of time. But it's those small companies that rely that don't have any revenues, that are totally in the development space, and having to gauge and having to go out and get money and make these investments. I think without the certainty of knowing sort of what FDA is going to look like, what the requirements are, who they can talk to, et cetera, I think that will have an effect on innovation.
Final question has to do with FOIA. FOIA is an integral part of the whole regulatory process because companies are always filing FOIA requests to get information about themselves, about their competitors. Actually, I used to run the FOIA system at FDA when I was there. Now we see we're not sure how it's going to be run. We know a lot of the FOIA people were let go, if not all of them. And I think the intention is to move that up to HHS. Let me start again with John, because I'm sure that you file a lot of FOIA requests. How will that, I'm going to call it a disruption, because I think a disruption is inevitable. How will that affect, the way that companies function within this new environment?
So as long as I can remember, no offense to you, Wayne, the FOIA system has been semi-dysfunctional. from pretty much from the get-go.
It wasn't when I was there, and I will
Okay, glad to hear that.
document that. I will document that.
So we do file a lot of FOIA requests on behalf of our clients, and for long periods of time, it would take 18 months to 2 years to get those FOIA requests answered. And so I would say that, and as you know, there are some companies that are in the business of filing FOIA requests, putting it into their own archives and database, and then charging you a lot of money to get those documents. So there's sort of two systems going at once, the FDA system and the private system. And I would say, I think the FOIA system is an incredibly valuable part of the FDA environment, and industry, both in the pharmaceutical, the device, the biologics area, rely upon FOIA to get important information. The fact that that was the first place that FDA decided to cut tells you what some of the people in HHS and FDA were thinking about, that these people are just paper pushers. And that's really not correct. These people are very valuable to getting a timely response back. I think the bottom line is we're going to see more delays at FOIA requests because it's a very people intensive issue. Maybe with AI being adopted throughout FDA, we may be able to try to handle some of those cutbacks with some artificial intelligence assistance. We don't know yet.
Dan, I'm sure you were involved in FOIA when you were there.
Yeah, I mean, as Jonathan said, it's never been the perfect system, and there's always been, it takes too long, and et cetera, et cetera. But I can't help to point out the sort of irony of the current administration saying that we're going to have maximum transparency. We're going to be the transparency administration, and at the same time firing the entire FOIA staff. And yes, AI might take over in a decade or so or from now. But again, I think that it's unfortunate that even a flawed system is not supported, and try to improve it, try to make it better, try to do more to get I always felt when I was there that one of our functions, even though it wasn't our primary function, was to get good information out to the public. I think that's something that FDA has a lot of that information. They collect a lot. They know not just the one company, but the entire industry. And that's really important information for the public to have. So I hope that they sort of think the way that they're going to do that and get it done fairly quickly.
Could I just add the corollary to that is that FDA has some very important websites where they provide the 510K website, the de novo issues, where that supplements what goes through the FOIA process, and that should be close to immediate, where you can go in through the FDA databases, see what 510Ks were cleared so you can make substantial equivalence decisions. And the same is true with regard to PMA summaries of safety and effectiveness, 510K summaries. Those are critical documents. If FDA cuts back those staffs with regard to IT and those websites, that would be criminal.
Just for the record, when I was there, it was centralized. It was run by the Office of Public Affairs. 90% of the responses were provided in 10 days. We were held up as a model within the federal government for FOIA. Then after I left, the whole process was decentralized into the centers, which didn't want to invest in FOIA. And that's why it became, as you said, somewhat dysfunctional. A long history of FOIA at FDA. We're going to turn briefly to our resource link segment now. We provide you with some valuable links that you might want to check out. So, Shelly, let's share them with our audience right now.
Will do, but I want to first point out that these links will be included on our website, fdawatch.net, so there's no need to write anything down.
Let's first look at our pharma and medical devices resource links. We're once again combining these as conversations surrounding AI heat up. These links come from the Pharma letter and RAPS, which recently published stories on drug makers and device manufacturers calling for clarity and change to FDA's guidance on AI in drug development and AI-enabled medical devices. Trade groups such as Pharma and Bio on the pharmaceutical side and AdvaMed and MDMA on the device side have recently submitted comments. On the pharma side, although these groups support FDA's risk-based approach, they emphasize the need for greater transparency in how the guidance will be applied to AI tools, noting that elements of the guidance remain too vague. Pharma pressed the agency to exclude AI models that do not influence patient safety, product quality, or study integrity from its guidance, and urged FDA to offer clearer definitions and a more predictable process, including a proposed 7-step framework to assess AI tool credibility. On the device side, industry groups are seeking a more tailored approach that considers the different types of devices that utilize AI. We've just talked about AI and its importance in the future. According to these groups, the guidance focuses on complex AI-enabled devices, but does not consider or address simpler AI device systems. We'll see how FDA responds to these comments and further addresses these concerns. AI is a topic that we at FDA Watch are dedicated to covering. We have a 3-part series with the law firm Arnold & Porter. The first episode of that series is already available on fdawatch.net. We encourage you to check it out, and there will be 2 additional parts to the AI series.
Thanks, Wayne. Let's look at our foods link from Reuters. FDA suspends food safety quality checks amid, you guessed it, staffing cuts. According to the article, FDA is suspending a quality control program for its food testing labs as a result of its significant staffing decreases. The proficiency testing program, as part of the agency's Food Emergency Response Network, is designed to ensure consistency and accuracy around 170 labs that test food for pathogens and contaminants to prevent foodborne illnesses. An email seen by Reuters from Fern's National Program Office reads, unfortunately, significant reductions in force, including a key quality assurance officer, an analytical chemist, and 2 microbiologists at FDA's Human Food Program Moffitt Center, have an immediate and significant impact on the Food Emergency Response Network proficiency testing program. According to the article and email, the program will be suspended at least through September 30th, and means will be unable to do planned quality control work around lab testing for the parasite cyclospora in spinach or the pesticide glyphosate in barley, among other tests. Obviously, this is huge news on the food front, and we'll surely be covering this in some capacity in our next Foods Focus episode. Check out the resource link for now to see the full story. And finally, let's turn to our cosmetics link. In a recent episode of law firm Holland & Knight's The Eyes on Washington podcast, guests were asked about the perceived lack of recent discussion on cosmetics at FDA. Guest Rachel Gartner, a partner at the firm, said the following in her response, quote, I don't think that cosmetics are going to be in any way insulated from the scrutiny that we're seeing food under. I just think that they're next. Adding, and what that's going to look like, given that historically the products have not been regulated to the same degree as food and supplements, it'll be really interesting. And it'll be, I think, a huge adjustment for the industry. End quote. It'll be interesting to see where things go with cosmetics at the agency. There's, of course, been a lot of wait and see since the passage of MOCRA, and you can bet we're watching this at FDA Watch. Again, this link and all of these links are available at fdawatch.net. And on that note, Wayne, it's time to thank Dan and John for being really such excellent guests on this episode. Thank you both for joining and for your time.
Good to see you all. Thank you.
We'd also like to thank our podcast creator and executive producer, Michael Levin-Epstein, and our assistant producer, Sam Hoffmeister.
And Shelly, I want to remind all of our subscribers that if they want to suggest a guest or be a guest on our show, or want to be a marketing partner or a sponsor, or just comment, you can contact us at info, I-N-F-O, at fdawatch.net. That's info at fdawatch.net. And definitely check out our website. Again, it's fdawatch.net. Finally, if you're so inclined to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, it really does make the difference. And don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, please do sign up to subscribe. It's free. Make sure that all of your family, everybody you've ever met, subscribes to FDAWatch.net. That's the only way to make sure you won't miss a single episode of FDA Watch.
And as we say at the end of every episode of FDA Watch, if you really want to watch what FDA is doing, listen to FDA Watch.